It was an incident on the sidelines of a pro-Palestinian march a week and a half ago that's tied the Met in knots. The policing of these protests so fiercely contested from all sides.
I met up with some people to just go on a walkabout around London.
An organisation called the Campaign Against Antisemitism, or CAA, released this video last week in which an officer describes its boss, Gideon Falter, as openly Jewish.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence.
The Met apologised for the phrase openly Jewish being used, but described what they called a new trend of those opposing these protests appearing along the route, often filming themselves. As such, they must know their presence is provocative and are increasing the likelihood of an altercation, they said. They then apologised for that apology, saying being Jewish is not a provocation. Gideon Falter's CAA has campaigned for these marches to be limited since October, calling them, as the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman did, hate marches. This weekend he went further, calling for Sir Mark Rowley to resign, calls echoed by Braverman over the weekend and then put to the Prime Minister this morning.
What happened was clearly wrong, and it's right that they've apologised for that. And yes, I do have confidence in him, but that's on the basis that he works to rebuild the confidence and trust of not just the Jewish community, but the wider public.
Today, Sir Mark Rowley met with both the Home Office and the Mayor of London to discuss community relations.
Lawful protest is the cornerstone of a democracy, but it must be lawful, peaceful and safe. And I say in a respectful way to those who are protesting, although you may be on the right side of the law, and I understand fully the right to free speech, be cognizant and be aware that inadvertently you may be saying stuff that's causing Jewish friends and neighbours anxiety and fear. So you may be on the right side of the law, but don't use language or behave in a way that causes upset, concern and fear amongst our Jewish friends, neighbours and colleagues.
Today, Sir Mark and senior officers spoke with Jewish community group leaders, apologising over recent communications. One of those groups, the CST, thanked the police for their support for the Jewish community, but called for them to learn from their mistakes. In a previous statement, it said the incident itself was a mistake that would stick in the public mind, one in which the context and detail had been lost in the heat of controversy. They said the officer had tried to do the right thing, but ended up making things worse in a very difficult situation. A longer version of the exchange was released by Sky News yesterday.
Please don't be too disingenuous, sir.
I'm not being disingenuous. I can walk wherever the hell I want.
I'm afraid you
if I want to walk to that pavement, that's what I'm going to do.
So,
I think you're going to have to arrest me because I'm walking.
I'd rather not do that.
But then do it.
I'd rather not.
I want to get out of here. I want to go across there.
I'd rather not, sir.
And today, Channel 4 News has seen new exchanges with different officers in different locations. Today, both a former Chief Inspector of Constabulary and former Chief Superintendent said the officer was right to worry about a breach of the peace, a claim Mr. Falter called outrageous, describing criticism of him as victim-blaming. Dr. Leroy Logan, a former superintendent, said protests were some of the most difficult events to police.
The fact that there has minimum of arrests or disruptions throughout the last few months shows that the police are doing a very good job in very difficult circumstances. And it's a thankless task. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, in all honesty. And it's even compounded when you've got agitators like this who are looking for trouble.
The Met has invited selected media and community leaders to an internal planning exercise later this week, with officers discussing different scenarios that in the age of camera phones are more scrutinised than ever.
Well, joining me now, the former Labour MP Lord Mann, who's the independent advisor to the UK government on anti-Semitism. Do you think that first clip, a few seconds, which seems to be the one that Rishi Sunak was reacting to, was misleading?
Oh, well, it clearly isn't the full picture. And the idea that Sir Mark Rowley should resign, in my view, is absurd. Of course he shouldn't. Yeah, the big issue is, and threat to the Jewish community, is terrorism, and he's the leading expert on counter-terrorism available to the Met, so he should stay in his job, keep doing what he's doing on combating terrorism, and work closely with the Jewish community. And that's what I'm seeing this week.
So what do you think was going on with Mr. Falter then? I mean, did you see that as provocation?
No, I think Mr. Falter wanted to protest. And he called it a walk. It was a protest. He was there with others and he was protesting. And, we live in a democracy. He's entitled to protest, as are the, let's call them anti-Israel protesters. I think that's what they'd call themselves. They're both allowed to protest. But the police have obviously got to handle a situation where you've got two groups who don't see eye to eye with one another in the same bit of space. And it's going to be difficult for the police. It's always difficult. And I think the police have been handling this as best they can.
So do you think the Prime Minister's wrong to say that was clearly wrong of the police?
Well, the language that was used by the particular officer was the wrong language. People can learn from that, and it's important. People do learn from that. But the police, when you've got a big demonstration and angry people, and whenever there's conflict, there's a lot of anger about, particularly on demonstrations. For the police to handle that is difficult and complex. And, I think blaming the police, or the police are doing their best, rather misses the point. And what we need is civility from everyone who's protesting, whatever side they are, and not trying to literally cut across one another. Imagine if an anti-Israel agitator started demonstrating, walking through a Jewish communal event, then I'd expect the police to do something about it. And so, that we need to have consistency here. And the idea that people can simply walk into the middle of a demonstration when they're opposed to the objectives of that demonstration is clearly an issue the police should deal with.
Well, what about the fears of many Jewish people now who say, I'm afraid to go into central London on a Saturday in case we bump into the protests, or that they fear what they will come up against? Is that just, the price of free speech and democracy? Or, should they not, and is their fear correct?
Of course there's fear in the Jewish community. I'm going into Jewish communal organisations, into synagogues, listening to the Jewish community all the time, constantly. And there is a great fear there. There's fear after what's happened with the terror attacks in Israel. And there's fear because they're seeing large protests in this country. What the police need to look at and think through is how long, literally how long, how far protests should be, how often, where they should be located, what the inconvenience for shops is, for example, shop workers, customers trying to buy things, perhaps with children in shops, those kind of issues. That's what the police are re-looking at. I'm pleased to say this week. That's very, very encouraging. Just what they should be doing.
Sorry to cut you off. We're just on limited time. Just briefly then, some people have said, parts of London are no-go zones for Jewish people. Do you think that's true?
Well, London isn't a no-go zone for Jewish people. It's not a no-go zone at weekends. It's not a no-go zone, and neither must it ever be a no-go zone for anybody. But there are fears there, and it's important, therefore, the police are listening, talking to the community impacted, the Jewish community, to maximise how effectively they manage those protests. That's the job of the police, to make sure London isn't a no-go zone for anybody, and it isn't. And the police, I think, need to continue listening to the Jewish community and other communities in getting it as best they can.
Lord Mann, thank you very much indeed for joining us.